I stared at the black ink on that life insurance document, and my blood just turned to ice. It was a perfect forgery of my mom's signature. But there was one massive problem. She was in a coma the day it was signed. My mom, Eleanor, was an absolute force of nature. She built a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio from nothing. She spent her 20s fixing up rundown duplexes with her own hands. She turned them into a quiet little empire. She was brilliant, fiercely independent, and honestly, the center of my universe. Since I was an only child, we shared everything. We weren't just mother and daughter. We were an unstoppable team. Then there was her younger sister, my Aunt Valerie. Valerie was the complete opposite of my mom. She basically lived as a professional victim. Always caught up in some scheme or dating a guy who drained her accounts. For decades, my mom quietly paid Valerie's rent and covered her debts. She just tolerated her thinly veiled jealousy. Valerie deeply resented my mom's success. She hated how hard my mom worked, but she loved her money. When my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, our world just shattered. The doctors gave her 6 months. Within weeks, she was declining so fast. I was 26, working full-time, and thrust into an absolute nightmare. I tried so hard to manage her properties while practically living at the hospital. The exhaustion was just bone deep. The days and nights completely blurred together. I had to watch the strongest woman I knew fade away in that room. That's exactly when Valerie showed up with 2 oversized suitcases. She put on this huge, dramatic display of sisterly devotion. She moved right into my mom's house, claiming she was there to help. She played the supportive aunt role perfectly. At first, I was actually really grateful. I was just drowning in grief and exhaustion. Valerie would bring me coffee and tell me to go home and sleep. She kept saying, "A mother needs her sister right now." I was so blinded by my own pain that I didn't see reality. I didn't realize what she was doing while I was home crying. Valerie was sitting in the dim light of that hospital room, opening her laptop and systematically destroying my future. My mom passed away on a rainy Tuesday in November. At the funeral, Valerie wore a designer black dress she literally pulled from my mom's closet. She sobbed louder than anyone else in the entire church. She threw herself over the casket, playing the devastated sister for an audience of our extended family. But the second the reception ended, the tears just vanished. It was like a switch flipped. In the days following the funeral, her whole vibe shifted. The warm, supportive aunt disappeared completely. She was replaced by someone cold, entitled, and incredibly smug who refused to leave my mom's house. I walked in one afternoon and caught her throwing away my mom's personal photo albums. She was literally tossing our memories in the trash to make room for her own junk. When I finally asked her when she was planning to go back to her own apartment, she just gave me this tight, condescending smile. She claimed she needed time to process her grief in a place that felt close to her sister. Something felt profoundly wrong, but I was way too overwhelmed with handling the estate to fight her on it. Meanwhile, she was cruising around town driving my mom's luxury SUV like she owned it. A week later, I went to the office of Marcus, my mom's longtime estate attorney. He was a quiet, sharp guy in his 60s who missed absolutely nothing. He'd helped my mom build her entire empire. My mom's will was incredibly straightforward. Everything she owned was supposed to be left to me. But when I sat down in Marcus's leather chair, his face was uncharacteristically grim. He folded his hands on his massive oak desk and looked at me with deep sympathy. He told me he'd just gotten a notification from the life insurance company. The primary policy, all $3 million of it, had a change of beneficiary form filed just weeks before she died. The money wasn't going to me anymore. The new sole beneficiary was Valerie. I picked it up, and my hands were literally shaking. At first glance, it looked totally legit. It had my mom's name, the policy number, and Valerie listed as the sole beneficiary. At the bottom was my mom's signature. It was shaky, like someone who was really sick, but the loops were definitely hers. Right next to it was a blue notary stamp and a handwritten date. October 14th. I just stared at that date until it burned into my brain. And suddenly, all that panic in my chest just vanished. It was replaced by this cold, razor-sharp clarity. I knew exactly what she did. I looked up at Marcus, and my voice was finally steady. I told him that on October 12th, my mom had a massive seizure. She fell out of her hospital bed and completely shattered her right wrist. The doctors had to put her arm in this heavy plaster cast. It was her dominant hand, totally encased in solid plaster. She couldn't even hold a pen, let alone sign a legal document. Because her brain activity was so unstable, they had to take extreme measures. They put her in a medically induced coma to protect her. She was completely unconscious until October 18th. I tapped the paper on his desk. I looked Marcus dead in the eye, letting the timeline sink in. The trap was already starting to form in my head. I didn't yell and I didn't cry. I just told him the absolute truth. On October 14th, my mom was unconscious, and her writing hand was in solid plaster. There is no physical way she signed that document. Marcus didn't gasp or act shocked. He's seen every kind of human greed in his career. He just sat back in his heavy leather chair and slowly took off his glasses. He let out this long, measured breath. He folded his glasses on the desk, looked at the forgery, and then looked at me. With total chilling indifference, he said, "Well then, it appears we have a felony on our hands." Marcus wasn't just a lawyer. He was a master strategist who despised fraud. He told me going to the cops right now wouldn't work. Valerie would just lawyer up and tie the money in court for years. To destroy her, we couldn't just prove the signature was fake. We had to find out exactly how she did it, who helped her, and what else she stole. We needed to build an airtight cage before she even noticed. For the next 3 weeks, I played the most exhausting role of my life. I pretended to be the grieving, defeated daughter. I let Valerie stay in the house. I even let her drive my mom's car. I answered her calls and listened to her fake sympathy. During one call, she had the audacity to claim my mom secretly promised her the money. She said it was to make up for a lifetime of overshadowing her. I forced myself to cry on the phone. I told her I just missed my mom. I gave her exactly the victory she wanted. I fed her massive ego so she'd get sloppy. But the second I hung up, the tears stopped. I wasn't a scared kid anymore. Meanwhile, Marcus and I went to war. We hired a handwriting expert and a private forensic accountant. Her name was Sarah, and she was terrifyingly efficient. She didn't waste time with small talk. She just opened her laptop and started tearing Valerie's life apart. She gained access to bank records and digital footprints. What we uncovered over those 3 weeks made my stomach turn. Say in a natural American voice, revealing the scope. Valerie hadn't just forged the insurance document. She had been busy the entire time my mom was dying. She used those late nights in the hospital to rob her. Sarah discovered Valerie had been using my mom's unlocked phone. She bypassed the two-factor authentication on her bank accounts. She was siphoning thousands of dollars into a hidden LLC. While I was at home crying myself to sleep from exhaustion, Valerie was sitting right there in the dark, holding my dying mother's hand with one hand and stealing her entire life's work with the other. Sarah didn't stop at the bank transfers. She dug into the notary stamp on that life insurance document. Turns out, the real notary reported his stamp stolen months ago. Sarah checked Valerie's credit cards and found a purchase for a custom rubber stamp. She hadn't just forged the document. She committed severe notary fraud to make it look official. She literally sat there and practiced my mother's shaky handwriting until she perfected it. Valerie's greed was a bottomless pit, and it was about to become her grave. By late November, Valerie's confidence had mutated into pure arrogance. She called me up, sounding so sweet and patronizing. She said the property taxes on my mom's house were too much of a burden for me. So she generously offered to take the house off my hands. She demanded I come to Marcus's office on Friday to sign over the deed. She even threatened to take me to court. I just held the phone, listening to the woman who robbed my dying mother. I kept my voice trembling and quiet. I told her I didn't want to fight anymore. When I hung up the phone, the act was over. I looked across the table at Marcus and Sarah. We had everything. Every bank statement, every IP log, every receipt. The trap was officially set. Friday afternoon arrived with a cold, biting wind. I sat in the large conference room of Marcus's law firm. I was wearing my mother's favorite navy blue blazer. I felt perfectly calm. My grief had completely burned away, leaving nothing but absolute focus. The heavy glass door swung open and Valerie walked in. She looked like she had just stepped off a yacht. She had a brand new designer handbag and a fresh blowout. And right there, around her neck, she was wearing my mother's classic pearl necklace. She looked at me with this sickening mix of pity and triumph. She sat down directly across from me. She placed her manicured hands right on the table. She really believed she was about to take the last piece of my mother's legacy. She had no idea what was coming. She sighed dramatically and put on that fake sweet voice. She said she was so glad I was finally being reasonable. She actually claimed my mother would want us to be at peace. Then she told me to hurry up and sign the paperwork. Before I could say a word, Marcus walked into the room. He didn't have a deed in his hands. Instead, he was carrying a thick, heavy black binder. He sat down at the head of the table and adjusted his glasses. And he looked at Valerie with total, chilling indifference. Marcus didn't say a word at first. He just opened that heavy black binder. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. Then he slid it right across the table, stopping it perfectly in front of her designer back. It was a blown-up, high-resolution photo of the change of beneficiary form. The signature and that fake notary stamp were right there in plain sight. Valerie just glanced at it, looking kind of confused. She actually rolled her eyes and told Marcus the insurance was already settled. She said she was only there to get the deed to the house. Marcus completely ignored her. He just reached back into the binder and pulled out a second piece of paper. He slid it right next to the photo. It was a certified medical record, highlighted in bright yellow. Marcus kept his voice low and measured.
He told her the file confirmed my mom was in a deep coma from October 12th to the 18th. He also made sure to mention her right arm was locked in a plaster cast. Then he looked right at her. He asked how, miraculously, her signature ended up on a legal document dated October 14th, right in the middle of her coma. Valerie's face just froze. That smug, patronizing smile vanished in a split second. Her jaw started twitching and she was blinking like crazy. She kept darting her eyes between me and Marcus. She let out this nervous, high-pitched little laugh. She actually tried to say my mom must have signed it before the seizure and just dated it wrong. She said, sick people make mistakes. I leaned forward across the table. I didn't yell and I didn't raise my voice. I just looked her dead in the eye. I told her, my mom didn't sign it, Valerie. You did. I didn't even let her take a breath. I told her we knew she bought a fake notary stamp online and shipped it to a P.O. box. I watched all the color drain from her face when I brought up the credit card receipt. All the color just drained right out of her face. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. She opened her mouth to say something, but absolutely nothing came out. Marcus didn't give her a single second to breathe. He just kept pulling more papers out of that binder. He was laying them out on the table like a dealer at a casino. He laid down the bank statements showing all those unauthorized transfers. Right next to them, he dropped the registration for her little hidden LLC in Delaware. Then came the IP logs from the hospital's guest Wi-Fi. It was undeniable proof. The transfers were made from her device, right there inside my mom's hospital room. Marcus looked right at her and listed it all out. Wire fraud, forgery, identity theft, and grand larceny. He told her she'd stolen 40 grand and tried to take 3 million more. He said, "This is a federal crime, Valerie." Her hands started shaking so bad she couldn't control them. You could hear her manicured nails just clicking against the mahogany table. The reality of it all was finally crashing down on her. That arrogant woman who demanded my mom's house? She was completely gone. Now she was just a terrified, desperate criminal who realized she'd walked right into a trap. Her eyes were filling up with panicked tears. She dropped the act completely. She leaned across the table and started whispering, begging me to just take the money back. She pleaded with me to let her walk away because we were family. I didn't feel an ounce of pity for her. I just stared at my mom's pearl necklace around her throat. I told her she stopped being family the second she used my mom's dying breaths to rob her. I said, "You thought I was just some naive, grieving kid you could bully, but you're not walking away." She stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor, grabbing her bag in a total panic. She turned and marched straight for the heavy glass doors, desperate to get out of there. But before she could even reach the handle, the door swung open from the outside. 2 uniformed police officers and a plainclothes detective stepped right into the room, blocking her exit. I hadn't just invited her here to scare her. Marcus had actually forwarded that entire black binder of evidence to the Financial Crimes Division days ago. They already had an arrest warrant. They were just waiting in the lobby for my signal. The detective stepped forward and held up a pair of metal handcuffs. He looked right at her and calmly asked her to confirm her name. Valerie started backing away, shaking her head violently like she could somehow undo it. She looked at me and her face was just contorted in absolute horror. She screamed my name, begging me to call them off. She started crying hysterically, saying she was sorry, that she was just so jealous of my mom and didn't mean for it to go this far. I sat perfectly still in my chair. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched in absolute silence as her entire world collapsed around her. The officer grabbed her arms and secured her wrists behind her back. Hearing the metallic click of those handcuffs echoing in that quiet room, it was the most satisfying sound I've ever heard. They escorted her out of the building while she cried hysterically. She was paraded right through the law firm lobby in her stolen designer clothes and my mom's pearls, finally exposed to everyone. Because of the evidence, she was denied bail as a flight risk. She sat in a cold county jail cell until she finally pleaded guilty to wire fraud and forgery. She got 6 years in federal prison. The next day, I went back to my mom's house. I grabbed some heavy-duty trash bags and just started tossing Valerie's junk. Every cheap knockoff and piece of clutter went right into the plastic. I didn't bother folding a single thing. I just wanted it out. I dragged those heavy bags down the driveway and dumped them on the curb. Standing there, I finally felt like I could breathe. I hired a professional cleaning crew to scrub the entire house from top to bottom. I wanted every trace of her erased from our lives. They opened the windows, letting the fresh breeze clear out the stagnation. That evening, the house was so quiet, but it was a good quiet. I went out to the back porch and sat there with a hot cup of tea. Looking out over the garden, I finally felt peace. The dark cloud she brought into our lives was permanently gone. My mom's legacy was safe, and her empire was intact. I know wherever she is, she's smiling, knowing she raised a daughter who fights back. Welcome to the end of today's entry in Karma's diary. When toxic family members mistake your grief for weakness, they usually seal their own fate. Let's break down the 3 major lessons from this story. Lesson 1. Jealousy doesn't just vanish. It festers in the dark. Valerie's resentment was a lifelong poison she hid behind fake smiles. Never trust the sudden kindness of someone who spent a lifetime envying you. Lesson 2. Grief is blinding, but facts are undeniable. When you're devastated, it's easy to let manipulators cross your boundaries. But the truth always leaves a paper trail. So trust your gut and check the evidence. Lesson 3. True power doesn't scream. It sits quietly and hands over the receipts. The best revenge isn't yelling or stooping to their level. It's staying silent, letting them build their trap, and watching them walk in. Thanks for opening the diary with us today. If this story hit home, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Remember, your peace is worth protecting. Stay strong and let karma do the heavy lifting. When I look around this house now, I don't see the betrayal or the dark cloud Valerie brought in. I just see everything my mom built from the ground up. Every single room feels lighter today. The air is clear, and it honestly feels like the house itself finally took a deep breath after holding it for months. My mom planted these hydrangeas years ago, and they survived every storm. It's a pretty solid reminder that deep roots can't just be ripped out by a jealous weed. Marcus actually called me the other day to finalize the very last of the estate paperwork. The insurance money is officially locked away, totally safe and secure. As for Valerie, she's got a long time sitting in a federal cell to think about her choices. There are no more designer bags and definitely no more stolen pearls. I used to think I was just a kid playing dress-up in my mom's blazer, but standing in that law office, I realized I'm exactly who she raised me to be. I'm officially taking over the real estate business full-time now. It's a ton of work, but I've got the absolute best blueprint in the world to follow. So if you're out there right now dealing with a toxic family member who thinks they can just walk all over you, don't let them. Stand your ground. Keep your receipts, trust your gut, and never be afraid to let the trash take itself out. You owe them absolutely nothing, so protect your peace. This is Karma's Diary, officially signing off for the day. Stay safe, keep building your own empire, and I'll see you in the next one.